the secret formula or I'll destroy the Krusty Krab!
Ah, you and what army, Bug?
What army? What army? Look around you, crabs!
You planted grass?
Correct!
Any game made before 2010 at this point likely holds the legacy title, and there are plenty of games made in the 2000s with plenty of modern standing too. Overlord is probably one of the more unique titles of its time, being a sort of battlefield commander simulator, where a majority of the game is played using this personal army that follows the player around. These minions do most of, if not all, the fighting on the Overlord's behalf, as well as doing all manner of labor for him as well. This often makes the game effortlessly easy, as there's usually no direct threat to the Overlord himself. However, since the Overlord does have a way of fighting on his own, what if we played the entire game without minions being a factor at all, and thus we ask ourselves the question, can you beat Overlord without minions? So, let's start out by ironing out some details on what we're actually doing. Now, you cannot beat Overlord entirely without minions, as you need them to push objects out of the way and open doors for you, take artifacts and objects on your behalf, and generally just use them for puzzle solving. However, the Overlord also has his own weapons, spells, and armor himself, as well as having ways to upgrade them, meaning if the Overlord can win every physical fight on his own, then the minions in his army become nothing more than a general labor force who just sit around and watch him fight. And that's what we'll be testing today, so let's get into the rules. Minions cannot be used for fights in any direct way. This is mainly just in reference to direct attacking, however, minions also can't cause damage to enemies, such as getting bombs off next to them. I can use them to lure enemies as long as where I lured them doesn't directly result in the enemy's death. I can also sacrifice minions to the blood and mana pits to restore my own health and mana, and lastly, minions can be used to open doors, break or move objects, collect tower artifacts, and be utilized on any non-combat aspect of the game. If a minion does attack something by mistake, and believe me they will because they have absolutely no discipline, I have to automatically restart or return to the tower. And that's actually all the rules. But with nothing else to say, we got started on our game with the minions opening up the refrigerator in their basement they left me in, and the game was afoot. Moving around through the general opening of the game and skipping the tutorial entirely, and immediately move to the first world of Mellow Hills, where our first task is to slaughter a bunch of sheep for life force in order to make enough minions to push the object out of the way. It does take a little while to get all the sheep, but this first task takes a little bit even with minions, and believe me when I say we will need every piece of life force we can get. Anyways, once we get in, we tell the minions to break this guy's house, a halfling comes out, and we murder him in one hit. We then move down the road and stab a bunch of other halflings to death while they're sleeping, and get to stealing our comically large pearl back that allows us to teleport to and from the tower.
Holy moly, Pearl!
When we get back to the tower, it now allows us to cast fireballs, as well as granting us the ability to control 10 minions at a time, meaning our labor force was now large enough to push the larger piece of rubble out of the way and continue on. There, Gnarl insists that we get into arson and light the entire field on fire, burning the halflings inside alive as well, and has us do a double take with the second field right next to it. After incinerating the remaining children, the game introduces us to the blood and mana pits, which allow you to restore a full bar of health or mana depending on which one it is. Since these are fully allowed for the challenge and I'm basically naked until around mid-game, you can expect me to make full use of both of them, especially in the early game. Moving on to the halfling slave camp opening, I attempted to go after the rock lobbers first before the warriors got to me, and it backfired pretty horribly, leading to my first loss. It's not too big of an issue this early game, as it's relatively easy to get back to where we were, so we just go back through it and actually kite the halflings like a normal person, and then we go up and murder the rock lobbers. We make sure to murder the halfling squads that come out to ambush me too, before I put the minions on the wheel to open up the door, and then we take the chance to also chop up all the sheep hiding behind the halflings, as stated earlier, every piece of life force will end up counting. Moving into the slave camp after the minions get the door open isn't very hard, as although there are plenty of halflings in the slave camp to fight, they aren't nearly as clumped together as they are outside the gate, so we just go through stabbing up the Halo Grunt stand-ins with little matters of importance occurring. I take a little break since I'm low on health and have my minions break these barrels on the back corners to hopefully have a few mana and health potions in them. They fortunately did, and the minions also open up the doors containing the peasant slaves in them. Normally after this, you're supposed to charge down with them and fight the halfling horde, but since I didn't have a chance to put my minions away yet, I sort of just stood there and watched them all get eviscerated by a bunch of fat 7-year-olds with butter knives, thus the remaining murder work went to me. It took a few minutes, but it wasn't that bad. We then have a quick minion protein shake and then move to fight the troll. Now the troll does look intimidating, and in his defense he does have the reverb fart sound effect going for him. But he doesn't really do that much damage, and his kiting strategy has a very high margin of error. So we deal with him pretty easy, and after slaughtering the remaining halflings, we get the crane in the back that will allow us to actually fix our tower. After doing this, we gain access to the dungeon, which will allow us to fight enemies we've already fought again in order to harvest their resources. Unfortunately, minionless and without gear, most of these fights, not even the useful ones, are next to impossible, with me not even able to fully wipe out the rock lobbers.
Magician's brick!
That's okay though, we'll come back to this when we have good enough armor. Moving on to Spree Village, since we freed them from the slave camp, we immediately open one of the doors, causing halflings to pour into the town and start attacking the peasants. Once again, I would help, but I'm bound to keep my minions out of combat. After the Spree massacre that I wasn't blamed for at all, we push out a little bit and make sure to also go into this corner and grab the first domination spell upgrade. The first upgrade is kind of useless to us, but the second upgrade is definitely something that we may very well need. Anyways, we journey down further and explode inside this troll's mouth before committing home invasion on the halflings in order to get the food the halflings stole from the peasants. Realizing I'm low health, I do a quick back and forth from the tower, so I enter the place with full health instead. I then just proceed to go hog wild on the halflings, just a lot of kiting back and forth, not too big of a deal. The situation does present itself though when it shows the wall houses, which will consistently spawn halflings until the house itself is broken by a minion. I questioned whether or not this would be okay for me to break, since it's technically not an enemy, but it is a factor in combat. I went ahead and erred on the side of caution for now though, considering taking out 1 or 2 halflings at a time wasn't really enough to stop us anyways. We even avoided the section of freeing the peasants inside the homes due to it being too risky to cause an attack.
Michael! Don't leave me here!
I have to break this pumpkin because it has a minion disc inside it, and I need at least 15 minions in order to progress. We get it done fairly quickly, even with the infinitely respawning halflings, and I'm right back to storming through the homes, stabbing halflings in their sleep, mainly just clearing out the area so I can easily just come back with some minions and finish the wheel. Doing so, we advance to the second section of the halfling homes and approach either the largest or second largest collection of halflings in the game. Normally for this section, you move around the sides of the room, picking off halflings slowly with your minions, and shutting off the other spawners. I don't have that option, so unfortunately I'm kind of just stuck taking an entire pack alone. I knew this was possible, but I won't lie and say I got it the first try either. My eventual solution had me using fireballs to lightly thin out the horde in the center before beginning my kiting, and afterwards utilizing the potions next to my tower beacon. However, even after that, I just barely made it through this section, and even worse, we are almost immediately introduced to the halfling cook afterwards, the halfling's little walking tank enemy. He, like the troll, has a high margin of error for kiting, but in exchange he takes like a month to stomp. Once again, this next section is supposing you to have using minions to break the rat boxes so they can go and swarm the cooks for you. However, even though I think this would be okay for the minions to do, I just didn't feel like getting them to go through and go over and risk accidentally hitting them, so I instead just convert a bunch of them into mana and explode all over the chefs. And then we get to the food, and this part is actually where my playthrough choices fairly differentiate. Once you bring the food out, you have the option to either give it to the peasants, or you can terminate them and keep the food for yourself and get 50 life force. Normally I would just let the peasants have it, because the 50 is lower than even a single beetle harvest, but right now, since I can't even effectively harvest life force, that's out of the question. However, since I don't usually do this option, I was surprised to be rushed by a horde of peasants after destroying the original 3. I just make it back to the mana pit and burn them alive though. Getting the food or giving it either way opens up the final mission of the halfling story arc. Also, since we already advanced in the halfling homes now, the game assumes we've defeated all the enemies here, so it actually renders all the spawners we didn't destroy as destroyed anyways, meaning we can go and get the money back that was in here too. Opening the gate to the party, we see the hero halfling leader Melvin has eaten so much that he has ascended to a Reddit moderator before that was even a popular insult, and we are introduced with the first hard fight of the playthrough. We have to start by shooting this guy in the mouth with a fireball to free our minions from his song, and then immediately go to the spawning pit in the corner over here to put our minions away, and I misclicked and accidentally hit a halfling. Well, we all know what has to happen now. This was not the first, second, or even third instance of this happening during this fight either. Essentially, during this fight, I need to go get 2 different wheel spokes so we can get inside while simultaneously fighting off a horde of halflings that spawn endlessly. You can break their spawners in a normal game, but in all honesty, even if I decide fully that it's okay to break the spawners, the minion is likely going to hit something on his way through anyways, so it's not even worth it. I can take on the halfling hordes on my own thanks to the blood pit right next to the minion spawner, but fighting off the halflings and making sure my minions don't attack anything, protect them while they deliver the wheel, and turn the wheel once it's done caused a fair bit of stress. We eventually get it by puppy guarding the minions from the halflings, and then some defenders come out once they're finished turning the wheel. Fortunately, we don't actually need to fight any of them and just juke them to walk right in. When we get inside Melvin's kitchen, we immediately have the ability to turn a wheel, which will cause a bunch of wild red minions not under my control to turn on the cooking fires, instantly terminating all the Reddit chefs. However, I didn't realize this at the time, but this might actually violate the challenge. Not because the minions under the fire destroyed the cooks, but because my minions turned the wheel to allow it. So, post-editing, I really quickly played through the whole first story run of the game again, and went back here to see if I could beat the halfling chefs without it, and turns out, after fighting with all the cooks for a few minutes, you totally can. And then we approach Melvin, the first main boss of the several we'll have to take on. We're locked in a confined room with him and the battle begins. His first phase is relatively similar to that of a troll in that it's high health and a wide margin of error for dodging, but also has the caveat that it does a fair bit of damage. We get through it just fine, and it's not until phase 2 where he tries to eat randomly that it suddenly becomes a real fight. Melvin starts rolling around, which is significantly harder to dodge. Not extremely difficult or anything like that, but since I was somewhat reckless on the first phase, it wasn't the most relaxing experience. Additionally, for the simple fact that I would probably have armor and weapons by the time I fight the second boss, which in all likelihood is going to be Oberon, Melvin might be the contender for the hardest boss fight of this playthrough for that reason. Though the likelihood was somewhat stomped out when I beat Melvin off the first time, and then he blew up. I guess he didn't heed SpongeBob's warning either.
Am I gonna blow up?
No, worse! It'll go right to your thighs!
My thighs?
And then you blow...
And then right in the next room, we open another oven and we get our first red minions, and we're tasked with collecting more red life force in order to get enough of them to move the red minion hive and be able to summon them anywhere. The problem is that you're supposed to go after these beetles in order to get the life force, and we can't fit through this area ourselves, so we're supposed to use red minions to get them. Fortunately, we can get back to this by simply returning to the tower and then coming back where the game will reset your progress to a certain degree, setting my red minion count at 0. From here, red beetles will then spawn at this upper location where I can reach them, and I harvest them myself before safely moving the red hive out of the burnt area, and we're asked to use the red minions gimmick. Now, the red minions are my least favorite of the 4 minion types. Basically, they're the only minions that have ranged attacks and throw little fireballs that, after consistent damage, can light their targets on fire. However, they also have the lowest health in the game, being lower than even the blues. Fortunately, I can just sub in using my fireballs to satisfy Gnarl for this section, and the door opens without issue. It is important to make sure that my reds are far away from combat at all times too, as they tend to have the same lack of discipline, but also have ranged attacks. Anyways, moving on, we finally unlock the guard markers, allowing us to tell minions to guard a certain location, meaning I no longer have to go back and forth with my minions every time we need to do combat. The reason we're given them is so that the red minions can hold off the waves of cooks, while the other minions turn the wheel. Fortunately, that's completely unnecessary, as brown minions are actually strong enough to tank the hits while pushing, and we don't even lose any of them either. But with that being said, we safely got the red minion out of harm's way, and we were now capable of removing any fire hazards with their helps, storing the red hive back at the tower in the same place that the halflings did.
Put you in my oven!
With the red minions on our side now, we can go to 3 different new locations in Mellow Hills. I'll start by going for the steel smelter for one reason and one reason alone: I need an upgraded axe. Unfortunately, I tried to also harvest some sheep while I was waiting and lost focus, causing some of the attackers to go after my minions who fight back in self-defense, prompting an automatic death. This also happened twice, prompting me to get so annoyed that I just manually pulled the smelter away from the halflings the 3rd time around to not force another restart. With the smelter now back at our tower, we can forge and upgrade my weapons and armor in order to make me less pathetic in a fight on my own. We won't be making any steel armor, but we will be upgrading my axe with nothing but damage. We don't have enough brown minion life force to fully upgrade it yet though, and I'm still not winning any fights in the arena yet, so we go to the one place where we can harvest life force with absolutely no pushback, and that's just by incinerating some sheep. Slow, but not offensive. Anyways, once we have enough, we execute the upgrade, a comical amount of minions jump into the smelter, and now we have an actually decent weapon. We test it in the arena too, and it's good enough, but not yet for optimal dungeon harvests. Anyways, we move on to Castle Spree, as there is a health object there, and the Blues are in Heaven's Peak, which I need to finish the Oberon quest anyways. Outside, we just clear a few fires, and are introduced to the Roborian Raiders. They are pretty nasty combatants with decent damage and health to stand on, meaning each one will usually get a few hits on me too. Thus, we'll need to rely on our fireballs to thin out fights we go into with these guys. We have to open up the castle by sending several minions over to the wheel on the other side through a hole in the wall, but since we have no way of defending them, we kinda just let the raider guarding it stab them, and once inside, since there's such a high concentration of them in the castle, when I went for my first attempt fighting them off, I got completely stomped, without even finishing off the opening attackers. Problem is that until I am able to regenerate my own health, if there isn't a blood pit around, my only real hope for healing myself just lies in random cates and chests. And I thought that because there really hasn't been much here that I might have been cooked. Fortunately, after a few tries, I learned that I don't even need to fight the raiders. Simply activate the tower beacon on the other side of the castle, teleport down, teleport back, and when I get back, all the raiders are gone. Before we go inside, we make sure to grab the health disc too, to make myself just a little bit more tanky. Inside the castle, somebody lights a peasant on fire, this woman shows up and starts talking about UK politics or something, and then has a schizophrenic episode telling me how to control my minions during the opening fight, even though I came in alone.
This boy's about as sharp as a wet blanket hanging on a clothesline.
Seriously, who are you talking to?
I'm on cocaine.
She tells us she comes from Heaven's Peak, and there's a plague there that causes outbreaks of Zen rabies, except with demons or something. I don't remember, I wasn't paying attention. And then she releases us back to go fighting through the castle, and I decided now would be a pretty good time to actually explain the general plotline of Overlord, because I realize this is still a pretty niche game. Essentially, the minions are this semi-demonic creature that are all invariably and enthusiastically dedicated to serving whoever the current Overlord is, and in turn, serving evil. Since the Overlord can largely make their own decisions though, even in a more pragmatic sense, oftentimes making situations better, they likely use evil as more of a subjective term than anything. This Overlord, once a person, was stashed inside a sarcophagus in the tower. You'll find out why near the end of the game, for when the previous Overlord was slain so the minions could rebuild. He was slain by a group of heroes who also happen to be the same heroes we are hunting down now. And as you'll soon notice that there will be a theme that there's something really wrong with each one of them. Then we get to the Overseer fight. Normally you're supposed to have red minions attacking it on both sides so it has nowhere to hide, but with no reds we just blast fireballs at it. I didn't have enough mana so I just let them slice my throat open. Respawning the second time around we have enough to start and we blast the thing down with no problem. After incinerating it, we bring Rose, the British lady, her comically large suitcase, and then she demands to move into our tower. We of course oblige for no particular reason, and back at the tower I test to see if I'm strong enough to harvest the life force beetles yet. I am not. Anyways, we move on to the final path of the 3 in Mellow Hills, being to move on to Evernight Forest. Inside Evernight Forest, which originally belonged to the elves, now looks grim and dark with ghosts of elves around every corner. There are also these giant skeleton rats, stags, and boars that remind me of Mallow from SCP, except a furry isn't drawing Rule 34 of them yet. Anyways, we learn from one of the elven ghosts that Oberon, the elven hero, took a really long nap after they finished all over the previous Overlord. The nap was so long that he slept through the Dwarven-Elven Battle of Stalingrad, with his sleep being so powerful that his dreams began invoking nightmaric entities around him, which did stop the invaders, but it also destroyed the entire forest and made a giant tree shield around himself, and we have to break all 6 of these root nodes around it in order to fight him. This is a fairly long project, so we get started by moving into the swamps to find our green minions. Normally we would have our minions utilize these poisonous plants to destroy the nightmare stags, but well, it's actually not really all that bad, as the nightmare stags are kinda crappy in combat anyways, with their one gimmick being that they can resurrect other nightmare creatures. But that's pretty much how the entirety of the swamp section goes, especially considering my other minion types can't swim anyways, with me just walking from island to island beating the crap out of a bunch of Mallow simps, while they desperately try to resurrect each other until we make it into the green minion's cave. Entering into the green minion caves, we start collecting green life force, which will be the most important component to my armor late in the game. We're also introduced to the green minions general gimmick. Greens are my favorite minions, and basically like how red minions are immune to fire, the green minions are immune to poison and toxins, and their general combat gimmick is instead of standard melee attacks, they will attempt to jump on a creature's back and stab them, and can even cloak themselves when they aren't moving. We will be experiencing none of those things other than the toxins part though, and also melting their life force down into armor. And speaking of armor life force, after making our way through the nonsense of the caves, and we actually get eyes on the green minions hive that we're supposed to take home, this cutscene plays where it causes 5 green minions to be added to your spawning pools. However, a little bit of an exploit we can use here is going back into the tower and then teleporting back for the cutscene to play again, causing another 5 green minions to be added. Seeing as how I'm still not quite strong enough to fight the beetles in the dungeon, this is something I'll be exploiting, and we get cracking, causing artificial minion inflation. I think I did this for about 30 to 40 minutes, not certain about the timing, but by the end of it I had over 800 green minion life force. Anyways, back to the task at hand, we get busy moving the hive back to the tower, mainly just using the green's ability to break the poison plant so we can proceed. We get to a section where Gnarl wants us to use the green's backstab ability on this troll, but there's also nothing stopping us from just going straight to turning the wheels, so that's what we do, and we only lose 1 minion from the troll's attacks. But that was really our only obstacle in the caverns, and a few poison plants later, we add the green minions to our side, the second flavor of door openers, and the third flavor of general laborers. Then we get to an interesting conundrum right outside of the caves, and that's there are 3 wild green minions who aren't controlled by me right next to these beetles fighting them. We know they aren't mine because they aren't counted on the minion counter, and when they die it shows that they can't be revived. Plus, this isn't an obstacle either, as even if I go back to the tower and enter this section from a different location, it shows that the beetle has lost some health, indicating a fight from the green minions. I don't personally count this, as the minions here don't technically belong to me, just like how the peasants don't belong to me, but it's interesting trivia. Anyways, with green minions on our side, we grab the mana object down here, as well as break the second pod, then my greens accidentally attack something and I have to jump into the poison and drink it.
And is among the more deadly poisons known to man.
After another respawn, we break the pod again and grab the shield spell that's here. Level 1 isn't that good, but it might clutch a situation or two. And moving on, now that more of the map has been opened from the pod route, we get to fight the first skull boar, which is the highest health of the 3 nightmare creatures and has a high damage attack. However, it also has the longest windup for an attack and cooldown, thus also has the highest margin of error in the entire game, with it most of the time barely even able to get a second attack in while you're wailing it to death. Not really that big of an issue for us to fight alone, but after the first skull boar, we get a whole welcoming party of all 3 nightmare creature types, and thus get fighting. I do get chunked a little bit, but since there are both blood and mana pits by the pod that they're guarding, it's mostly a non-issue. Anyways, we break the pod and then immediately more attackers come who I also fight through. It's not really that rough of a fight either the second time around, and after we finished all over the last skull boar holding the wheel lever, we leave the next area open, and then we have to leave Evernight altogether for now, as we can't advance any further for now without the blue minions. So returning back to the tower, we go to Heaven's Peak. And once we're there, we immediately ignore the lore placement in camp and instead go to this back area to murder all of this guy's sheep for life force while he desperately tries to stop me from doing so. Going even further away from the lore placement, we experience the first antagonist this world has to offer, being zombies. Zombies are really weak and arguably weaker than even halflings, but they invariably show up in large groups, and since I am only one Overlord, that means they're going to rapidly wear down my health in pretty much every fight I have with them. There are some chests back here and some of them have healing potions, but largely most fights are going to just drain me of health and mana until I get my armor. So that being said, you might be asking, why am I going all the way back here? And that's because there's a health disc over here that I really want. I want it considering I'm still a ways away from getting my first set of armor, but anyways, after about 10 minutes of fighting zombies, looking for health potions, and spitting fireballs on the 2 zombie lords guarding the health object, we finally get it in our tow and safely haul it back, and now we can actually begin the Heaven's Peak arc. We make it to the camp where we learn that this camp is just outside of the city of Heaven's Peak, which has some really bad plague going on that we have no idea what it does, and then this guy turns into a zombie and we pretend to be surprised at the Zen rabies.
Oh, is this a double beat?
Oh well.
One of my minions threw a fireball at the zombie before I could react, so we all knew what had to happen. This guy wanted to talk to us to tell us that there's a way into the city through the sewers, which also happened to require the blue minions. Fortunately, blue minions is the exact reason why we're here, and we journey on fighting through zombies in the lower swamps. I was going to have the peasants help me with the zombies, but since the peasants still hated me because for some reason aggro saves over from death sometimes, it was more like the zombies were helping me with the peasants. Anyways, after we suppress these losers, we go back down to the other end of the swamp where we meet our first succubus. Normally with succubus fights, they will start by targeting one of your minions and taking them away, where in OnlyFans fashion, they will begin stepping on your minion before sucking their blood, causing them to explode. We skip this entire part and instead just have to contend with their basic attacks, which do pretty decent damage, have a low margin of error, and also have two variants, with one being significantly faster with no margin of error. This is still more than doable by me, but it does involve taking risk when attacking because you can't be certain which attack she will use. I lured her up to the camp the second time around so she could help me murder these peasants without consequences, and after I got a good dodging spot for her, me and this obese alcoholic man worked together to whittle her down, but in the end I just ended up setting her mouth on fire. After our chastity is secure, we make sure to grab the mana object in the swamps before having our green minions clear out the mustard gas blocking our way into the moist caves where the blue minions live. Inside, you get the cliff notes on how the minions work. They aren't strong attackers and have the second lowest health, but they can resurrect minions that die in a way where their body doesn't explode. Also, they're the only minion that can swim and deal magic damage, as well as being immune to magic. And we just get to work moving through the caves, beating up dodo birds, and listening to this absolutely beautiful soundtrack that I'm going to play for you while we move the blue minion hive out of here. In regards to blue life source, I don't really have any need for it, aside from making sure I can make at least 4 blues, as neither the weapon nor the armor upgrades that blue life force gives really plays any factor in my plans. We then come across one of the most annoying enemies in the game, this large snake thing which you're supposed to lure using minions, before having other minions attack it on the head. Fortunately, I work just fine as bait, and we can actually get rid of the thing ourselves in just under 2 minutes. Not great, but good riddance, it's dead. Some progs then show up who can one-shot minions, but they can also not one-shot minions if there are no minions around, so we just go through doing the puzzles pretty easily after I clear them out. I did have one instance of a blue attacking a wisp, since there was nothing for me to end myself on, so I just had to take the exit game loss of minions, instead of just reverting back to my last autosave with a death. But after redoing the whole thing again, we safely get the minion hive out of there, as well as getting this bag of money that I also cleared out. And outside on the other side of the dodo bird pond, we grabbed the other bag of money too, while getting violently pecked, and with that we were ready to go into the sewers. After dying one more time because the blues attack the zombies. And once we do enter, you don't need to kill the zombies outside, just walk right in. Normally, what you're supposed to do in the sewers initially is to summon some blues, and place them next to a brown minion spawner in the water so the blues can immediately save them, and then resurrect them so you can use them to fight the zombie horde. However, in our case, we just do our typical kiting sense using our spin jutsu on the zombies. Traveling through sewers is a consistent errand without minions, as it has you going through and retrieving wheel spokes while making sure to leave an uncompromising amount of zombies both before and after you enter areas. But we make do with just the upgraded axe we have right now, as although I'm not walking out unscathed, I can take out the zombies relatively well on my own, and I'm already marching back and forth, so I scrounge health potions while I'm around anyways. There will be a stark contrast when I finally get my tier 2 armor, which the smelter I need for is actually inside these sewers. But after a few more minutes of these goofy battles of attrition with the zombies, where I go, murder a few of them, then run away to heal myself and then murder more, we finally have the wheel spokes in place and we could advance. We meet up with this cultist who stitched his mouth shut. I don't know if they have some human centipede-esque compromise for the eating situation in this cult, but I didn't really care to know either. Then another one of these chode-guzzling snakes shows up.
And I've thought about you every day since—
A mistake!
I don't have a way of reaching it on my own right now, so we sort of just have to let it eat my minions while making sure none of them fight back. It made me a little bit sad to do it like this, a little bit more zombies and fighting, and I also make sure to get the domination spell level 2, which will let me cast Confusion, which will play a big part later, and afterwards we break out into the city of Heaven's Peak. We will immediately go back into the sewers, but first we need to murder all of these silent knights that are guarding the entrance and preventing people from leaving. After doing so, we open up the gates, and this peasant lord drops me that Sir William the Paladin was going to have a wedding, and then a bunch of flying demons started showing up, and then zombies too, so they canceled the wedding in its entirety. I'll be honest, I don't know why the Silent Order was here, but we get this guy to lore drop us about the smelter in the sewers before we grab the tier 2 fire spell, being the flamethrower object that's up here, and some red minions to head back into Undertale. They break the door down, zombies, more fighting, been there, done that, and then we come across the commando zombie, who is really just a zombie who is also a summoner. They're also immune to fire, so we just walk up to them and kick them in the pancreas, and all is well for this section, but where the actual smelter is, we have a bit of a problem.
Conductor, we have a problem! Conductor, we have a problem! Conductor, we have a fucking
So this section has 2 commander zombies who are immune to fire, and they're also in a spot where I can't just go up and kick them in the pancreas, meaning killing them is kinda out of the question. Additionally, they are summoning a constant supply of zombies who are more than capable of ripping my minions apart, as well as body blocking them, and that's not even accounting for the minions, that while I'm sending them in, they might fight back in self-defense or misinterpret an attack. Fortunately, we have the exact solution to this, and that is the confusion spell I just got, as when I cast it, it will cause most enemies to randomly wander around instead of attacking for as long as I can continue feeding the spell mana. We go down, I cast the spell, and it produces enough of a distraction dance to the zombies that we are able to safely get the smelter away from them. But after that, we turn it into the tower, I immediately return, and we can finally make that armor that I actually need. We put 400 green minions in order to give me a passive health regeneration at all times, and put the rest in brown minions that I didn't have all of at the time. The smelter flares on, a bunch of minions jump inside, and we are back to Evernight. As conductor, we have no more problems. But back inside the Elven Forest with the blue minions and halo shields, I decide to speedrun it, and we advance into Oberon's cave. Inside the cave is kind of similar to the previous pod fight, with just a handful of all 3 nightmare creature types, and I'm able to pretty effectively punch my way through here, especially considering I now have armor that regenerates my health over time. There's not even that many skull boars either, but other than that, we get to the other mana object that's in here too, before we go to breaking the 4th of the pods and exit the cave through the side that the root was once blocking. Outside we face some more trolls from earlier. Well, actually these are cave trolls, they're different. Anyways, we have no issues with them, and then we burst inside of the temple where this crybaby idiot elven ghost starts complaining that I'm here, even though I'm literally trying to break the pod so I can kill Oberon for them. Also, Rimworld raiders here have graduated to defiling graves. Normally during this section you can utilize your blue minions to attack the elven ghosts because herp derp magic, but otherwise the ghosts are immortal and we kind of just have to ignore or avoid them. Basically, what we have to do here is go and throw open the tombs until we open 4 in specific, and it opens up the door. They didn't really specify the logic on this objective, but we move through anyways. The plus side of the elven ghost being immortal is I also don't have to worry about minions attacking them. There were a few instances where it got close with the Rimworld raiders that were also in here, but largely we are able to just get all the tombs opened pretty easily, and even incinerating the raiders beforehand. The confusion spell even works on the elven ghost too, and we actually get through this first part the first try. And into the inner sanctum, we finally get a face on the kleptomaniac who's been sending raiders everywhere to steal shit for no reason. We have to murder these 2 trolls before it lets us break the pod in the back, but after that we're nearly done with the pod shields. Well, actually we're entirely done with the pod shields, as the last one is right next to the other spawn in Evernight that became completely exposed when a root isn't obstructing it. We break it, leaving Oberon now open for the fight. Before we fight him though, we run a quick errand now that the root is no longer blocking it, and that's retrieving a health disc from the 2 unicorns guarding the last sacred tree of the forest or something. I don't really care, I just want the health object. It takes a few minutes, especially considering the unicorns keep trying to go after my minion markers to pick a fight with them, but afterwards we get the object just fine, and now we're ready to deal with Oberon. The Oberon fight almost immediately felt like I was going to have problems, as normally you can't physically reach him on your own, and instead have to rely on your minions to go and hit him for you. Fortunately, that's actually not an issue at all here, as my fireballs can easily hit and damage him just as well. And even more so, there's a mana pit and spawning pits right on the left side of the screen, so this is completely doable, and I get to work slamming fireballs into his face, dodging his roots, and periodically dealing with whatever nonsense he summons. Ironically though, the first thing he summons are frogs, which have little to no effect on me, aside from comically pushing me around.
Please, I would like to get started.
We go right back to blasting Oberon in the mouth with fireballs. In hindsight, I probably should have switched to the flamethrower, seeing as how it's cheaper in regards to mana, and I already have the spell at this point in time. Nevertheless, the second call of Oberon comes in the form of unicorns, who I've already displayed are more of an annoyance than an actual fight I need to worry about. Once again, especially because of my armor I currently have, I'm not even sure I need to kill these things while I'm fighting them either, but I wasn't going to risk getting ganked by halflings like what happened with my first death, so we just continue on. The skull rats are literally nothing worth worrying about, and I deal with them faster than anything else so far. We punch them out easy and go right back to blasting. And that's how pretty much the rest of the Oberon fight went. I started blasting, he tries to shove tree branches up my ass while I'm doing it, I keep blasting him, so he sends his little butt minions after me. I murder them too, and eventually we finish him off. Letting us go over and perform the finishing move on him once he is thoroughly defeated. I do exactly that, and just like Melvin, he explodes for some reason.
All our food keeps blowing off.
But we had successfully defeated Oberon without minions, and we even got the second shield spell tier, with the rest of the game looking very promising. And it was at this point that I decided to end part 1 here, as well as declare this as a 2 or even 3-part series, as so far this video was over 30 minutes long, and I'm not even halfway through the game yet. There are a few sections towards the end that we may have trouble with though, but I also have a few shitpost memes up my sleeve too. But with the game being afoot, now stay tuned. But if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, please leave me a comment down below letting me know your thoughts, as well as what you'd like to see next, both Overlord and other old games like it, and otherwise. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing, as among my channels, I upload new long-form content every week, as well as new shorts every other day encapsulating variety content, including challenges, guides, memes, audience participation, playthroughs, and even theories. Also, join my Discord with the link in the description, as well as the pinned comment to become part of the show. But with all that being said, thank you again so much for watching, and big thank you to my channel and Patreon members, and I will see you all next time.